This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make it with Squarespace. Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to a new YouTube video. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite cameras I've ever used, the Fuji GFX 100. So for those of you who don't know, this is the Fuji GFX 100. It's a 102 megapixel medium format camera. You can see that it's a medium format camera by this beautiful sensor right here. I mean, just look at that light, it's pretty crazy. This camera is absolutely incredible. It shoots 4K 60 video, has IBIS, has dual card slots, all the fun stuff you could ever want. And it also has this cool little EVF tilt adapter, which I will chat about in a bit. But essentially, I picked this camera up late last year, kind of as an advancement in my photography career. And I wanted to talk to you guys about my experience with the camera so far. This is by no means an entire review, I wouldn't say. I definitely want to come out with a video in the future for more of a long-term review, but I've had this camera now for the better part of 6 to 7 months. I waited this long to make this review because I wanted to make sure that I shot with this camera enough in order to give you guys an actual review with, actual knowledgeable information about the camera, as well as some great sample photos that I've taken with it. And now I feel like I'm really at that point. I've been using this camera for a while now, like I said, and it's been an absolute joy. And I really want to just get into it and explain to you guys what I love about this camera and where I see myself going with this camera specifically. So as I said, I purchased this camera late last year, kind of to build out the commercial side of my photography business. If you guys don't know, I am a photographer day by day. I also run this YouTube channel now, so I do a bunch of photo and video stuff. But from the photography side, I was always eyeing a medium format digital camera. It was something that I was really interested in purchasing at some point in time. And kind of the stars aligned and I was able to pick one of these up. So I picked up this camera as well as two other lenses, the Fuji 45mm f2.8 and the 110mm f2. Now these are roughly 35 and 85 mil equivalents on a full frame camera. So I figured this would be a perfect start for me. Down the line, I want to get some sort of zoom for sure, but I think for now, and for the past several months, these lenses have worked perfectly for me. So I was already shooting a decent amount of commercial work when I picked this camera up, but I wanted to kind of differentiate myself as much as I could. A lot of the big, huge campaigns that I was looking at were all shot on medium format. You can tell by the amount of depth in these images. This is something that I was really interested in applying to my own work. I wanted to see what my work looked like on medium format, and overall, I just wanted to see what my experience would be like shooting with such a massive camera with huge file sizes. And I just wanted to see if that could fit into my everyday workflow. So obviously this camera was not cheap by any means. If you guys know, I've been a photographer now actually for about 8 years. 5 of those years have been professionally, and I've learned so many things throughout that time period. I've owned so many different cameras and many different lenses, and I've worked my way up to something like this. It hasn't started, just right out the box of me just buying a super expensive camera. I worked really hard and spent all my own money to purchase this camera and purchase the entire system. But it set me back almost $20,000. So that's a crazy amount of money to spend on a camera. But for me, this is an investment, and I knew I can make that money back over time shooting high-end commercial campaigns. So you're probably wondering by now, was it worth it? And let me tell you guys, yes, absolutely. I love this camera, and I really want to explain to you guys why that is. Obviously, with 102 megapixels, you get incredible image quality. Also with this medium format sensor here, that paired with 102 megapixels, you're just going to get like incredible files to work with. That's something that's been really enjoyable for me to be able to, crop and manipulate the files however I would like in post-production. And typically you can do that obviously with any digital camera out there, but it's really something when you have a massive medium format file to work with. You can crop a lot and it's really not going to lose a lot of detail, which I've found to be very, very useful. A lot of the time I shoot pretty wide with this camera. I shoot on the 45mm, which again is roughly a 35mm equivalent. And I can crop however I would like once I bring the file into Capture One or Lightroom. It's super helpful, and I've found that that's a huge perk of having such a big sensor. Something else that really stood out to me as well is the autofocus and eye tracking capabilities on this camera. I just love how snappy and quick it is, especially when I'm tracking a subject and shooting even a little bit of motion. We're not standing completely still. That's where I see this camera really shining. It's got the medium format sensor, it has the 102 megapixels, but it can also shoot a little bit of motion, which I think is really, really underrated. When you look at other cameras like Phase Ones and Hasselblads, they're a bit more clunky and meant for mostly studio work or always on a tripod. And with this camera, you can definitely move around, which I think is a huge benefit. And it's really been helpful for me because I do love that kind of run and gun style workflow, and it works really well for me. I love how light it is given all the capabilities it has, and it just works really well. With that autofocus, you get tons and tons of different options and customizations, and it really has benefited me a lot. I rarely miss focus with this camera, and I found it to be really accurate. Also, this camera does shoot 5 frames per second, which again is kind of mind-blowing for any other kind of medium format camera out there in a similar price point, or even in the medium format digital marketplace as a whole. You can't shoot it for very long. Obviously, it's going to need to buffer, and it does shoot to SD cards, so you have to have extremely fast SD cards to put in the camera to make sure that you have enough space, and also it can buffer at the same time and read those images and also write them to your card. Obviously, with 102 megapixels, you're going to be getting massive file sizes. Most of the files coming out of this camera are over 200 megabytes in size per photo. So I want to let that sink in for a second. It's a massive amount of data. You can shoot in smaller increments of the raw format. You're going to be getting a little bit less detail, but nothing too crazy. So it's kind of up to you. I usually just shoot uncompressed, and I don't, just rapid fire. I really take my time and plan out my shots accordingly. So this isn't necessarily unique to the Fuji GFX 100, but Fuji as a whole just has a really unique and simple menu layout system. I definitely find it similar to Canon, but just a little bit more customizable. It's not too much where you find yourself, lost in all the different settings. Very easy to find stuff, and I found that it, just works really well. Especially when I'm out in the field, I don't want to be spending a lot of time trying to flick through settings and find the right one for whatever I need. It just works really well, and it's really easy to find whatever I need. So I published a video several months ago about editing some files with this camera, and the one thing that really has impressed me so much, obviously this has to do with Fuji again in general, but the actual colors that you can get out of this camera is absolutely incredible, especially when you import these into your preferred editing program of choice, Capture One or Lightroom. The colors are just absolutely incredible, and they're really easy to work with, really easy to manipulate, and there's just so much depth that comes with a medium format sized image. And 102 megapixels, you also get 16-bit color depth, so it's a little bit more than your standard, usually 14-bit color depth on most DSLR cameras. It's just incredible, and it's really, really fun to pull and find which color you want to work with. And the image almost never breaks down. I can really adjust highlights, adjust shadows accordingly. Beautiful dynamic range that's really fun and easy to work with. So obviously with Fuji cameras as well, you get film emulations. These don't really matter as much for shooting RAW, but if you're, for some reason shooting JPEG on this camera, you're gonna be able to get the emulations. You can also use them in Lightroom, although I know they're not the exact same as the ones in camera. But obviously if you're using any sort of Fuji camera, the film emulations is a huge part of it and a huge part of the experience. For me, I don't necessarily use them too much in camera because I don't shoot JPEG, but it's nice to flick them on even when you're shooting RAW files, just so you can see what it might look like potentially when you import them into Lightroom. So in terms of video capabilities, this camera is actually very capable when it comes to video as well. As I mentioned, it does have in-body image stabilization, which works incredibly well. I've noticed that if you hold it really nice and steady and you take the EVF off like this, essentially what you can do is actually just pull the screen down like this, and then all of a sudden you have like a nice little LCD screen that you can film with, so the EVF doesn't get in the way. And all of a sudden this becomes a pretty lightweight package that has IBIS built in, and it does work really well. We filmed several videos on this channel with it, which I can link a few down below if you guys want to go check those out. But I definitely notice a major quality difference when we film on that versus a Sony or a Canon camera, because essentially you're shooting video with a medium format sensor. It's crazy amounts of depth. It almost looks like unnatural at times, but I think for the most part, the quality is incredible, and it's really easy to grade. You can shoot up to 4K at 60 frames a second, which I found to be very, very helpful if you want to slow your footage down at all, but it also just looks really, really crispy in 24 frames per second as well. You can do up to 400 megabytes a second, which is crazy. That's a lot of data, and make sure you have a nice big SD card to be able to write to. But if you want to use that in tandem with the IBIS or F-Log, which also is really, really easy to grade, there's a lot of options when it comes to video with this camera. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you buy this as your sole video camera. I don't really think it's necessarily worth it in that regard. There's a lot of cheaper options than $10,000 to get most, if not all, of the features that this camera has in terms of video specs. But I do feel like if you're looking for a photography camera, for the most part, that shoots amazing video, this is a great option for that. So you're probably wondering by now how it actually is to use this camera out in the field professionally, shooting photos. And I'm here to tell you that it's a great experience overall. I think when I first got this camera, it was a huge hurdle to jump over because of the large file sizes, and honestly it's pretty clunky working with medium format images. If you have a lot of them, I would overshoot like I normally did on a DSLR when I first got this camera, and that's just not conducive to a quick workflow whatsoever. So, I got a lot better with that over time. And definitely over the last couple months, I've really enjoyed using this camera, and I think I've really solidified a nice workflow that works for me. That being said though, it is kind of a pain in the ass to work on such big files, you know, especially if you don't have a really fast computer. Luckily my MacBook does actually a really good job working with these files. But like I said before, it's definitely a niche camera that's meant for a very specific group of people, and those people probably already know who they are and what they want out of a medium format camera. Now with all this being said, this camera is absolutely incredible. Everything from the tilt EVF right here to the autofocus system and the eye tracking, 102 megapixels, you got the medium format sensor in here as well. Pair that with great video specs like being able to shoot 4K at 60 frames a second with 10-bit color, and then also throw in there the incredible IBIS that this camera has as well. And you have yourself a really complete package that a lot of people would love to use on both photo and video projects alike. Now, would I recommend this camera to someone who's looking to upgrade from a DSLR? Most likely not. I would say that this camera, again, is very niche and it's meant for just a very specific group of people. Whoever that is, I don't necessarily know, but I think, you know, for me, I'm gonna be using this camera for a lot of commercial work down the road. That's a big reason why I moved to LA, to be able to expand my brand and start working with larger companies and being able to offer them more. And I think medium format images are something that everyone loves, especially in the commercial space. Now, I think this camera for me has been a great choice and a great purchase overall. With that being said, I think it's, you know, just an incredible camera, and, you know, it's something that I'm really looking forward to exploring over the next year. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments if you have any other questions regarding the GFX 100 system. All the images shot in this video were shot on the GFX 100 and edited in either Lightroom or Capture One. So definitely check out the other Fuji GFX 100 videos as well on the channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks again to our sponsor, which is Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video. If you guys are looking to create a custom website from scratch without all of the coding and hassles that come with it, Squarespace is by far the best choice out there to make a beautiful website. They have easy to use templates which make creating a beautiful theme that much easier, 24/7 customer support for all of your questions, and tons of design and layout options to really make your website stand out. With it now being 2020, I think it is the perfect time, if you haven't already, to make your own photography website to be able to display your work in a professional way. If you guys want to check out the link in the description, you can receive 10% off your first website or domain purchase. Thank you so much for watching, guys, as always, and we will see you in the next one.